The hour we all feared has arrived. The moment that changes everything is finally here. The Chosen Season 6 doesn't hold back anymore. The cross is no longer a distant shadow. It's right before us. These final hours of Jesus' life are filled with betrayal, injustice, and unimaginable pain. But behind every tear, every blow, and every silence lies the greatest act of love the world has ever known. This season takes us into the heart of suffering, forcing us to feel the weight of every moment as Jesus walks step by step toward crucifixion. And once you see it, nothing will ever feel the same again. Season 6 begins in the deepest night, where the world seems to hold its breath. The garden that once carried the whispers of prayer now echoes with betrayal. Judas has already sealed his fate with a kiss, and soldiers surround the one man who never lifted a sword. What was meant to be a peaceful place of prayer has turned into a trap, and from this moment on, the story races toward the cross with terrifying speed. The disciples are scattered, torn between fear and anger, unable to grasp that their teacher, the man who healed the blind and calmed storms, is being dragged away like a criminal. The silence in his eyes is louder than the shouts of the soldiers, a silence that tells us he is ready, even if no one else is. The trial before the high priests is a storm of chaos. False witnesses rush forward, each story twisting into lies that barely hold together. But none of it matters. The verdict was decided long before the night began. They don't want truth. They want blood. Caiaphas leans in with fury, demanding to know if Jesus is truly the Messiah. And when Jesus speaks with calm certainty, the council erupts in rage. Robes are torn, shouts of blasphemy thunder through the chamber, and the sentence of death falls like a hammer. Yet in the middle of that fury, Jesus remains still, his face unbroken, as if he carries knowledge that none of them can understand. What looks like defeat is actually the unfolding of a destiny written long before time began. Outside, Peter's courage shatters. The fire burns, the rooster waits, and fear grips his heart tighter than chains ever could. 3 times he denies, the one he swore to protect, and the sound of the rooster's crow cuts through the night like a blade. His face crumbles in horror as the prophecy comes true, leaving him broken and running into the darkness. This isn't just Peter's shame, it is humanity's weakness, shown in its rawest form. And yet, even in his failure, there is a thread of mercy waiting, though Peter cannot see it yet. The morning brings no relief. Instead, it drags Jesus into the cold court of Pilate, the Roman governor caught between justice and politics. Pilate can see no fault in him. His words carry a reluctant respect, but the noise outside grows louder, and fear of rebellion presses in on him. He sends Jesus to Herod, hoping to wash his hands of this burden. But Herod only mocks him, dressing him in a robe, laughing at his silence and sending him back like a broken prize. The cruelty grows thicker with each passing hour, not because Jesus resists, but because he does not. His refusal to fight, his refusal to perform, drives men to hatred, as if silence itself is more dangerous than swords. Back in Pilate's hall, the choice is placed before the crowd. One innocent man against one guilty criminal. Surely the answer should be clear. But the roar rises. Barabbas! Release Barabbas! The ground shakes with their cries, and Pilate's will collapses beneath the weight of their anger. He washes his hands in a gesture of innocence, but we all know the truth. His hands too are stained. With that decision, the path to the cross becomes unavoidable. Jesus is handed over to soldiers who see him not as the Son of God, but as an object of mockery. They twist thorns into a crown, press it into his head, and beat him until blood runs down his face. Each blow is a cruel parody of kingship, a crown of pain where there should have been glory. The suspense of this moment is almost unbearable because we know where it leads. Every step forward is a step closer to Golgotha, and nothing will stop it now. The Chosen Season 6 doesn't let us escape the horror. It forces us to sit with it, to feel the weight of each humiliation, each injustice. But even as the world turns against him, Jesus' eyes remain steady. There is no fear, no hatred, only the quiet strength of someone who has chosen this path. The final hours have begun, and with them comes a story that will shatter our hearts while revealing the depth of a love beyond imagination. The road to crucifixion begins with brutality. Jesus is taken by Roman soldiers, not for justice, but for entertainment. They strip him, tie him to a post, and unleash the whip. The sound of leather tearing through flesh echoes like thunder, each strike more vicious than the last. Blood stains the ground and laughter fills the air. This is no ordinary punishment. It is cruelty in its purest form. Yet through every lash, Jesus remains silent. He does not cry out. He does not curse his tormentors. His silence cuts deeper than any weapon, a silence that unsettles even those who beat him. The soldiers think they are breaking him, but in truth, they are only proving his strength. When the flogging ends, the mocking begins. A crown of thorns is forced onto his head, pressed so hard that blood runs down his face, blurring his vision. A purple robe is thrown over his shoulders, turning pain into mockery. They bow before him in false worship, spitting insults, calling him King of the Jews. The scene is meant to humiliate, but there is a strange irony hidden in their cruelty. They mock him as king, not realizing that he truly is one. Their laughter is hollow, their cruelty blind, and yet Jesus carries it all without resistance. Pilate steps forward again, torn between fear of the crowd and his own uneasy conscience. He presents Jesus, beaten and bloodied, to the people with the words, "Behold the man." But instead of pity, the crowd explodes with fury. "Crucify him! Crucify him!" The words rise like a storm, leaving no space for mercy. Pilate resists one final time, asking what crime deserves such a death. But the voices only grow louder. The leaders press harder, warning Pilate that releasing Jesus would make him no friend of Caesar. And with those words, his last defense collapses. Pilate sits upon the judgment seat, and the sentence is sealed. The order is given. Jesus must be crucified. The weight of this moment is crushing. We know that the innocent man is condemned while the guilty walk free. We know that the only one who could save himself chooses not to. The suspense doesn't come from wondering what will happen. We already know. It comes from feeling every step of injustice, every layer of cruelty, every heartbeat that carries him closer to the cross. Jesus is forced to carry the wooden beam of his own execution. The streets of Jerusalem are filled with noise as crowds gather to watch. Some shout insults. Others look on in silence, torn between horror and curiosity. The weight of the cross presses into his torn back, each step harder than the last. He stumbles, and the soldiers pull a man from the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the burden beside him. This detail, simple yet powerful, shows us that even in his weakness, Jesus allows others to share in his suffering. It is not just his journey, it is humanity's. As the procession moves forward, women weep along the roadside. Their cries rise above the noise. But Jesus, despite his pain, turns to them with compassion. "Do not weep for me," he says. "Weep for yourselves and for your children." Even in agony, his heart is not on himself, but on those around him. That is the mystery of these final hours. Every blow he endures, every step he takes, is not for his own sake, but for the sake of others, for the very world that rejects him. Finally, they reach the place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. Here, the atmosphere shifts. The crowd gathers like vultures, soldiers prepare their tools, and the air is heavy with dread. The beam is laid on the ground, nails prepared. The suspense rises to an unbearable peak because we know what is coming next. And yet, no matter how much we try to prepare, nothing can soften the horror of it. Jesus is stretched upon the wood, his arms spread wide, and the first nail pierces flesh. The sound of hammer against metal crashes through the air, mingling with cries of pain and gasps of shock. Each strike feels like a wound to the heart of everyone watching, a moment that forces us to face the brutality of humanity. And still, Jesus does not resist. He does not call down angels. He does not curse the hands that pierce him. Instead, he surrenders willingly, choosing to be lifted high upon the cross. The soldiers raise the wood upright, and the Son of God hangs suspended between heaven and earth, rejected by men, but fulfilling the very purpose he came for. The suspense breaks into silence as the crowd gazes upon him, some mocking, some weeping, and some unable to look at all. At this point, we realize the truth. The story has reached its climax, but it is not finished yet. The cross stands tall, but the final hours are only beginning. The Chosen Season 6 pulls us into this moment, refusing to let us escape the agony, the injustice, and the mystery of a love strong enough to endure it all. The cross now stood tall against the sky, and Jesus was nailed to it, lifted for all to see. The sound of hammer against metal echoed in the air, sharp and cruel, as the soldiers carried out their task with cold efficiency. With each strike, the crowd winced, yet many still shouted insults, their voices filled with anger and mockery. For them, this was a spectacle, a punishment meant to shame, but for those who loved him, it was unbearable to watch. Mary, his mother, stood at the foot of the cross, her heart breaking with every breath her son struggled to take. Beside her was John, the disciple who remained, his face pale with grief, trying to offer comfort but finding no words strong enough. The hours on the cross stretched like eternity. Every moment was filled with agony, but also with profound meaning. Jesus spoke words that no one expected, words of forgiveness. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Instead of cursing those who tormented him, he asked for mercy on their behalf. This was not weakness, but strength beyond human understanding. The Roman centurion watching from a distance felt something stir within him. He had witnessed countless executions, yet never one like this. There was a power, a peace, even in the suffering that unsettled his hardened heart. Darkness began to fall over the land, even though it was still midday. The sky grew heavy, the light fading as though creation itself mourned. Fear spread among the crowd, their confidence shaken by the unnatural gloom. Murmurs rose, some wondering if this was a sign from God, while others tried to push away the unease by shouting louder. Yet nothing could hide the growing sense that this moment was unlike any other in history. On the cross, Jesus cried out in anguish. He felt the weight of humanity's sins pressing down upon him, the crushing separation from his Father. His voice, filled with both pain and love, broke the silence. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Those words pierced the hearts of those listening, revealing a depth of suffering beyond imagination. Mary's tears flowed freely, her hands trembling as she reached toward her son, though she could not touch him. The disciples who had once promised to stay by his side were scattered, watching from a distance, filled with fear and regret. As the hours passed, his strength began to fade, yet even in his final breaths, Jesus continued to fulfill his mission. He looked at John and his mother, uniting them with a final instruction. "Woman, here is your son, here is your mother." In the midst of his suffering, he created a new family, showing that his love was never broken, not even by death itself. His words carried weight, and those who stood near felt the gravity of this gift. The earth trembled as the moment neared its end. The air felt charged, as if heaven and earth were holding their breath. Jesus, with a voice both broken and resolute, declared, "It is finished." With those words, he signaled not defeat but victory. The debt was paid, the sacrifice complete. His final breath escaped as he surrendered his spirit into the hands of the Father. The ground shook violently, stones split open, and the curtain in the temple tore in two. Fear gripped everyone present, from the soldiers to the priests. The Ahmed centurion who had been watching could no longer deny the truth. His voice, trembling yet firm, broke through the silence. Surely this man was the Son of God. In that moment, the brutality of the crucifixion was transformed into the greatest revelation of divine love. The cross stood as both a symbol of death and the doorway to life. For those who witnessed it, the memory would never fade. For the world, it marked the beginning of hope that would reach across centuries. And for his followers, though crushed with sorrow, the story was not over. Something greater was about to unfold. Silence settled over the hill after Jesus breathed his last. The crowd that had once mocked and shouted grew restless, some slipping away in fear, others lingering in shock. The darkness that had covered the land was heavy, pressing down like grief itself. For his followers, it felt as though hope had died on that cross. Mary remained at the foot of the cross, unable to move, her heart shattered but her love unshaken. John stood beside her, eyes fixed on the lifeless body of his teacher, unable to comprehend the weight of what had just happened. The soldiers approached the crosses to hasten the end. They broke the legs of the men crucified beside Jesus, ensuring death would come quickly. But when they came to him, they found he was already gone. To be certain, one soldier pierced his side with a spear, and blood and water flowed out, a sign of a life fully poured out. The centurion who had spoken in awe earlier now looked on with quiet conviction. He had seen enough to know this death was unlike any other. As the sun began to set, a new figure stepped into the story. Joseph of Arimathea, a man of influence, but also a secret disciple of Jesus. Summoning his courage, he went to Pilate and asked for permission to take the body down. Pilate granted it, and Joseph, joined by Nicodemus, carefully removed Jesus from the cross. The scene was filled with quiet reverence as they wrapped his body in linen and spices, honoring him in death as a king. Though the world had rejected him, the tomb they placed him in was new, cut from solid rock. A stone was rolled across the entrance, sealing the silence of that moment. For the disciples and those who loved him, this seemed like the end. Their Messiah was gone, their hopes buried with him. Fear consumed them, the thought of what would come next leaving them paralyzed. The same men who had once argued over greatness now hid in the shadows, unsure if they would be hunted down next. Yet even in this despair, there were threads of quiet faith. Mary Magdalene and the other women who followed him prepared spices and ointments, planning to return to the tomb after the Sabbath to honor his body once more. Their love would not allow them to let go so easily. Though grief pressed hard, something within them held on, a fragile but unshakable belief that this story could not truly end here. Meanwhile, the priests and leaders who had demanded his crucifixion were not at peace. They remembered his words that after 3 days he would rise. Fearful of this prophecy, they went to Pilate once more and demanded guards be placed at the tomb. Pilate agreed, and soldiers sealed the stone, standing watch to ensure no one could enter or steal the body. What they did not realize was that no human guard could hold back what was coming. As night fell, Jerusalem lay in uneasy silence. The earth had been shaken, the temple curtain torn, and hearts were left unsettled. The crucifixion had ended, but the consequences of that day were only beginning. The heavens themselves seemed to wait, as though creation knew this was not the conclusion, but the threshold of something greater. For the disciples, the weight of loss was suffocating. They had walked with Jesus, seen his miracles, and heard his promises. Yet now, with his body in the tomb, they wrestled with doubt and fear. Could they have been wrong? Was he truly the Messiah? Questions tore at them in the darkness, but hidden within their despair was the seed of hope, planted by every word he had spoken, waiting for its time to break forth. The cross had been the darkest hour. The tomb seemed final, but history was about to change forever. What no one expected, what no enemy could prevent, and what no heart could fully imagine was already on its way. The story was not finished. It was only just beginning. The crucifixion of Jesus was not just another event in history. It was the turning point of all time, a moment where sorrow and love collided in the most dramatic way possible. On that cross, pain and mercy were woven together, and in his final breath, Jesus changed the destiny of mankind forever. What seemed like a crushing defeat was, in truth, the greatest victory the world had ever witnessed. The cross, meant as a symbol of shame, became the greatest symbol of hope. Think about it. The Roman soldiers thought they were ending a rebellion. The religious leaders believed they had silenced a threat. Even the disciples feared it was the end of everything they had believed in. But in reality, this was the plan all along. Every cry, every wound, every drop of blood was part of a story far bigger than anyone could see at that moment. The silence of the tomb felt unbearable, but behind that silence, God was preparing the greatest miracle of all. The Chosen Season 6 dares to bring these final hours to life with raw emotion and unshakable truth. It shows us not just the physical suffering of Jesus, but the depth of his love so powerful that even death could not destroy it. As you watch these moments unfold, you may have felt the weight of the sorrow, the injustice, the heartbreak of seeing the Son of God crucified. And that's exactly why this story matters. Because if it ended there, with nothing but the cross and the tomb, the world would still be in darkness. But it doesn't end there. The crucifixion is not the conclusion. It is the bridge to what comes next. In just 3 days, everything will change. Fear will turn into faith, mourning into joy, and despair into everlasting hope. The disciples who hid in fear will rise in courage. The women who wept at the tomb will become the first witnesses of resurrection, and the very world itself will never be the same. And so, as the chosen continues to unfold this powerful journey, we are left standing at the edge of history's greatest mystery. The tomb is sealed, the guards are in place, and silence covers the land. But in that silence, a heartbeat of hope is still alive. Something greater is coming, something no army can stop, no leader can silence, and no grave can hold back. This is not just the story of ancient Jerusalem. This is the story of all of us. A story of pain, sacrifice, redemption, and a love so great that it reaches across centuries to meet you right where you are today. The crucifixion was the cost. The resurrection is the promise. And together, they form the foundation of a hope that will never fade. So stay ready, because The Chosen Season 6 is only preparing us for what comes next. The darkest hour has passed, but the dawn is near. And when the stone is rolled away, the world will finally see that death does not have the final word.